Professor MAKAU, welcome to Kenya's Biggest Conversation.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to the hot seat, man.
Thank you, and glad to be here once again.
Okay. It's been a grueling couple of weeks and then days as the election then happened, as counting and tallying and declaration happened across the country and at Bomas. You must have been very busy.
Yeah, well, that's all true. But before I say anything, I want to offer my deepest condolences to the family of Daniel Musyoka, the IEBC official. I think he was in Embakasi,
Yes.
who was apparently abducted and found murdered in Kajiado. This is obviously a dastardly criminal act, and I cannot fathom or imagine who would do such a thing. I'm sure that the authorities are following up on what happened, and we hope that they'll bring to account those responsible. It's very terrible.
It is.
Reminds us of Musando, really, in 2017. Yeah, very terrible.
Now that we've gone into that direction, you know, as a seasoned and a senior human rights advocate, when you see the case of Musando, and so far nobody has even been presented to court with capability about this, what does it say?
You know, there has always been a dark side to our republic, in which political killings and assassinations have always been there, especially during moments of national tension and inflection, such as elections. The terrible thing is that many of these killings have never been solved. You can go way back to the dawn of independence with Pio Kamapinto and others. There seems to be a conspiracy of silence about unveiling the perpetrators of these heinous offenses against individuals in our society. You probably know that I headed a task force on Truth Commission, and we recommended that these issues be brought to light. And of course they have not. And one of the things that I had hoped, that governments would do going forward, it's to investigate these murders, not just of Musando, but all the others that have gone before. It's a very dark record for our country.
Indeed. So again, to the issue of what's happened in the last couple of days, leading up to Monday at Bomas of Kenya. And you are the spokesperson for the Azimio la Umoja presidential campaign secretariat. We've seen that, and then we've seen the statement by Raila Odinga. We've seen the statement, him accompanied by his running mate Martha Karua, and saying an injustice basically has been conducted here. And there are very many questions that are left in people's minds. So exactly what happened in this election then? What would you say happened in the election?
Well, the election, first of all, let me say, has many black boxes, meaning blank spaces where information is not available. And to the extent that there are some bright spots where we have some sunlight, that those those sort of transparent boxes show us things that are not palatable. But let me just go back a little bit and say that the campaigns were largely peaceful throughout the country, except for a few incidents, including the attempted sort of stoning of the helicopter for my candidate, Mr. Odinga, and a few other incidents here and there. But there were other systemic issues that I think we cannot sweep under the carpet at this point. For example, the IEBC took a long time to produce a register. And once that happened, it was too close to the election for us to be able to carry out a proper audit of that register. So that issue remains in abeyance. In other words, it's an issue that we're going to have to look at. You remember very well that there were audits by the KPMG firm of the 2017 register, but also the 2022 register. In particular, there were issues which were identified in the 2017 register, including failures of technology or compromises of the infrastructure of technology of the IEBC. We've never really gotten to understand whether those issues were addressed because, again, those reports were not produced in time. So those are some issues there. There are other issues which were raised about the composition of, obviously, the returning officers of the IEBC. There were questions about the sort of ethnic balance there, which were not satisfactorily addressed. And of course, then, as you recall very well, there were other issues closer to the election, which were more concerning. One of them was obviously the sudden appearance of ballot boxes at the airport without the knowledge of many commissioners. There's information about what happened in the back room of the commission in terms of the procurement of those ballot boxes and why that was kept secret from even some commissioners. So that's an issue, obviously a point of discussion, if you will. Then, of course, there was a big question of the Venezuelans who appeared carrying important election materials in their backpacks. We understand that they were arrested. We are still trying to find out what happened to them and what, in fact, they were carrying in those backpacks and their purpose in this country. So, I mean, there are any number of issues that you can think about prior to the, balloting day. And of course, then there were, balloting day issues here and there. But I think the big one that I think we all have to discuss this morning is, of course, the conduct of the chairperson himself, Mr. Chebukati. I must say that we engaged him throughout, and we wanted to be a partner to him to carry out a clean election in this country. I myself met with him any number of times, offered our good faith and hand in doing this because, elections in this country are a matter of life and death, as we've just seen with Mr. Musyoka. And so it behooves the chairman of the commission to conduct himself with the utmost propriety. And I think, part of that, was missing in this particular case. Of course, as I said, the biggest one really is shall I call, unilateral announcement of the result of the election without the consent and the permission of the commission itself.
Prof, speculation is rife, about, what he could or could not have done. And, I mean, obviously, we're talking about process prior to the announcement. We're talking about corporate consensus, again, prior to the announcement that he made. And what really was the bone of contention here? And from the side which you speak, what exactly is the bone of contention? Because, I think it's clear to everybody that as the chairperson of the commission, he can actually go and announce the results of the election in the manner in which he did. He can announce them. Is the issue then that there was no corporate consensus before he did that? And from what we see in terms of reports today, is that, they talked about it. One side says they did, another side says they did not. Here we are, it's one man's word against another. But what exactly was zoning into the issue here?
Yeah. There's a reason, my sister, as to why we fought for and adopted the 2010 Constitution, which, as I've said before in this forum, is one of the most progressive in the world. Nations do not just wake up in the morning and decide to write new national charters. They do that for a reason. And and the basic reason is to cure existing problems, to put the country on a good footing. If you look at our Constitution, 2010 Constitution, you will see that it sought to create independent institutions within the state, but independent, essentially of the executive, because the constitutional framework that existed prior to 2010 created an imperial executive and an imperial president. So the idea was to decouple the executive from controlling, everything in our lives. One of those institutions which was created was the IEBC, the electoral body. We all know the history of the ECK, the Electoral Commission of Kenya, which is the predecessor organization to the IEBC. I think, Eric, I don't know that you are old enough to remember this, and I'm not pulling rank here, but I think CT is old enough to remember this. I will not review any ages here, and of course, my sister here.
The election of Lechko in 1956.
Yeah, the less said about my sister here, the better about age. That commission, you remember in 2007, and how shambolic that process was. Remember Mr. Kivuitu disappearing and then appearing at dusk to swear in a certain president just before night fell in Kenya. And you remember, of course, what happened later. Our country went into spasms of genocidal violence, and we almost went to hell. Mr. Kivuitu, I should say, I've met him later, a year later, bumped into him, I should say, in a restaurant, and I asked him what happened. And you know what his response was? His response was, that whole period is a blur in my mind. He could not remember what happened. But that is a problem that we are trying to cure, that a commission entrusted with this sacred responsibility of essentially taking the temperature of the country through an election and giving us leaders could be that shambolic. So that is what the IEBC sought to cure. Number one, to prevent a dictator from ruling the commission, and number two, to prevent the executive from capturing that leader. So Mr. Chebukati is not a dictator. The law is very clear on what he can and cannot do. And I should say the law, by the law here, I mean the Constitution, I mean the applicable IEBC law, and of course case law itself, which is pronouncements of judges. In particular, the one thing that I just want to focus on here is Mr. Chebukati's authority or powers to pronounce on the election. Mr. Chebukati does not conduct the election. The election is conducted by the IEBC as an institution. Mr. Chebukati does not give himself permission to pronounce on the result of the election. Mr. Chebukati announces the decision of the commission about the outcome of the election. He is a mouthpiece of the commission. He does not decide what to announce.
Which election?
This is a basic distinction. The presidential election. This is a basic distinction. He does not decide what to announce. He announces what is decided by the commission.
Is it the commission that decides or what the voters decide? I mean, we've got to get
No, obviously.
Let's start from the beginning.
No. Of course, the voters decide the election. The commission conducts it, tallies, and produces final figures of what the electorate wants to do. Then the commissioners decide, what Mr. Chebukati or the chair of the commission should tell the nation about the election. Decisions of the commission, and I'm sure you've read the applicable law, are taken either by consensus or by a majority of the commissioners. It cannot be taken by the chair himself. It cannot be taken by the chair acting with a minority
of the commission,
of rogue not just the commission, of rogue commissioners, a minority of rogue commissioners.
Prof, let me ask you a question.
So let me just say this before you get in.
Yeah.
So that's one. The second thing in the Maina Kiai case, of course, the court was very clear that the chair of the commission is not a dictator. He's just one individual who acts within a corporate body because the IEBC is constituted as a democratic institution.
Yeah.
I want to make this very clear. Otherwise, all the reforms that we've done in this country will be for naught. If Mr. C.T. Muga here could, if he became the chair of the commission, could just go up there
and decide
and pull out of his one ear, some figures and announce them.
So let me ask my questions. There is the Elections Act and the regulations that talk about, how an election shall be conducted.
Yes.
The Election Act also stipulates who shall announce the election.
Correct.
There are 6 elections being held on the second Tuesday of August every 5 years. And the returning officer is given a job, either constituency returning officer for MCA MP, county returning officer for senator, woman rep, governor, a chairman of the IEBC as a returning officer for the presidential election. Now, all these 6 elections that are being held, when a returning officer at the constituency level is announcing the winner or the outcome of the MCA and the MP election, who does he need to consult?
He does, the returning officer, first of all, at the polling station, must produce at the end of the election, balloting day, Form 34A. Okay? Those Form 34As are collected and taken to the county level, right? And created, as Form 34B in a presidential election, right? And then that is taken to the National Tallying Center.
Before you answer your question, answer mine.
Yes.
I'm focusing here on the one returning officer at the constituency. The constituency returning officer declares the result of the MCA and the member of parliament.
Correct.
Whose decision is he declaring? Is it the commission's decision or is it the decision of the voter as the returning officer? Is there a consultation with any other officer of the IEBC?
No, it's actually an automaton. Is essentially an automaton. His job is mechanical.
Actually, there is consultation. The process at the polling station, by the time you aggregate the votes, ballot boxes are brought forth. It's a process.
It's a process.
They're emptied. Those ballots are placed in heaps. When the counting begins, there is a physical showing of, before you put them aside, given the various candidates, it is shown. And in the presence of all the IEBC officers, all the agents, it is shown. This, you put it aside, one by one by one. When you have them aggregated into those slots, then they are counted. When they are counted and it is agreed upon, that is when you go to that form that you're speaking of, because the results then are entered into that form.
Right.
So at that point, you ask about consultation, that is a consultation.
My question is specific.
Yes.
The returning officer, does he consult any other IEBC officer for consensus before announcing the election? Not the agents.
Oh, no. You've missed my point. I am saying
I want Prof to answer my question.
Process, yes, he can answer.
Thank you. Prof, please answer that question.
Why are you stopping?
Using the law, because
why are you stopping your
because he's introducing another question before you've answered.
It isn't another question, really.
No. I think he's just filling in the gaps. And essentially, it is that at the polling station, when the balloting takes place and the counting takes place at the level of the constituency, the agents are present to either okay or dispute the tally that's been entered in that process. Then the returning officer then, announces the result. Okay, that result is still subject to verification.
The two of you are talking about a result without asking. This thing that goes into Form 34A, what is it that happens? That process, the very counting, emptying the ballot boxes, that is the consultative process.
But
Everyone is involved in seeing what it is that brings about the aggregate, which then goes into the form.
We're in agreement up to that
no,
point.
no,
Yes.
no, but let's not assume that simply because there's a process that CT is talking about, that process is now sanitized, simply because of that, the presence of
nature
all,
of it.
of all the individuals that we're talking about, because we know that there are other processes that are taking place prior to balloting. So, for example, when you go to the polling station, you are identified
Yeah.
through an electronic means.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
It's called a Kim's kit, we are told.
Correct. That's a famous word now, Kim's kit. Okay. You are identified there, and then you are given paper ballots.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say that a lot of shenanigans could take place in that process. Okay. So, because you are being identified, but you really, as a voter, do not know who is controlling the technology that's identifying you.
Yeah.
And you don't know who else has access to it.
You know, Prof,
You don't know that. Let me just say this.
Eric actually does have a point, because we are bringing one aspect of the electoral process into another without addressing one first. Because if we talk about issues of irregularity, that's a completely different discussion.
Correct.
If we're talking about processes and what Eric asked with regards to, look, there's a returning officer, okay? He has a function. And I was saying, before that function, something happens that enables that function that we refer to take place.
Correct.
Now, you have introduced yet another aspect, which is now a completely different discussion.
Which goes completely off my question. And I want-
No.
Let's take a break.
No, it
So we
is
can
not.
have a conversation off air as we take this break, and then we come back in consultations.
We
And
come
agree
back
on-
in consultation.
Yes, and agree on the question.
Okay,
The question
fine.
for me is very simple. You said that Wafula Chebukati cannot unilaterally announce the election result.
Correct.
It has to be the decision of the commission.
Correct.
My question is, he is one of 3 returning officers. Do the other 2 returning officers also have to announce the result in consultation and concurrence with the commission? That is all the question I'm asking.
We'll come
So
back.
you'll take us through the other 2.
We'll do.
This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room, 29 minutes to 9. We are taking a break. Professor MAKAU, MUTUA spokesperson for the Raila Odinga Campaign Secretariat, is here with us in the studio. We are looking back into the 2022 election, the conduct of it, and the reasons why the Raila Odinga presidential campaign is saying, no, there's some issues here, and we don't accept the result. We'll be back shortly after we take a look at the weather and traffic. Good morning.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Professor MAKAU MUTUA, spokesperson for the Raila Odinga Campaign Secretariat, is here with us. We are talking about what the issues are with this election. And you've told us, Prof, the main issue, and in fact, we even saw it from your candidate when he spoke, and he said, we reject this election. He said there were illegalities and irregularities in the lead up to the announcement of this election results, the presidential election result. He quoted the law, he quoted the minor KI decision. The chairperson of the IEBC, the dissenting 4, Juliana Cherera and the others, released a statement, and in fact they addressed the media. They quoted the KI ruling. The chairman of the election commission has come and said, I performed my duties in due and proper allegiance to the law. He quoted the law, he quoted the minor KI ruling. Everybody is quoting minor KI ruling, and they're saying they are correct. You're the only lawyer in this room. So we are asking for your lawyerly opinion. Every lawyer says the law is clear. So from the clarity on the side of the law, we want to understand, so what is the role of the returning officer in an election? So the chairperson of the Electoral Commission is designated as a returning officer of the presidential election. There is a returning officer at the county level, and there's a returning officer at the constituency level. And then there are the polling, the presiding officers at the polling stations. Now, the person who announces the result of the election is a returning officer, according to law, according to regulations. So before we come to this, IEBC as the body corporate and what happens at Bomas when the presidential result is brought to the chairperson of the IEBC. Take us through that MP, MCA returning officer at the constituency level. So the results are coming from the polling stations, being brought by the presiding officers to the constituency tallying center.
Yes.
And then, like CT is saying, in the full glare of everybody, the observers, the agents, the other election clerks, the results are announced per polling station, they are tallied, and then the returning officer announces the result of the MCAs and the MP, constituency MP.
Correct.
At that point, does the returning officer at the constituency level need to have a sitting with any other official of the IEBC for them to discuss and agree that, yes, this is the commission's result?
No, he doesn't. Because what happens at the polling station level, the tallies are signed off by the agents themselves of the various political competitors as a form of polling station verification. So there's that check and balance. Okay. But I think we should not overthink this particular issue. The results announced by the returning officer at the level of the constituency and transmitted then later to the IEBC headquarters is subject to further verification at the IEBC.
Okay.
That is a check and balance. That is why you saw all those people sitting there for long hours, 24 hours a day, agents and others, going through those forms 34Cs, Form 34As, and comparing to the data that was available on the IEBC portals to make sure that those numbers, were in agreement. That is a process of verification. Because as I was trying to say before we went on the break, if, for example, there was a glaring sort of disparity between, let us say, the number of voters in a constituency and the number of votes that were cast, let us say, for example, the number of voters, exceeded the number of registered voters in that constituency, that would be a glaring problem.
Yes.
That would have to be looked at.
Yes.
And that is why there's a process of verification. The commission itself is not simply a sitting dummy. Okay. Even after that process on the floor takes place, those figures are then looked at by the commission itself as a corporate body. And then the commission goes before the public and announces those results county by county, broken down into constituencies. You've seen the commissioners take turns in announcing that. I think at one point Mr. Chebukati announced it, at other points Ms. Cherera did, and other commissioners did.
Yeah.
When they do that, they are saying that they are satisfied that they have verified those results, and they have come to agreement that one of them can come and announce those results to the public. Okay. So there's a process on within the corporate body itself of agreeing on what the results are in a particular county, in a particular constitutional county. That's why they come out and announce it. That is not different from what happens when all the results from all the counties are tallied together by the commission after verification. And then the commissioners sit down and decide what the result is of the national election for the leading candidates, for all the candidates, rather, I should say. Then one person is sent out to make that announcement. If, for example, Mr. Chebukati was not there, okay, the vice chair of the commission, who is also gazetted as a returning officer, as a deputy returning officer, can go and announce the result of the presidential election. So they are not announcing what is in their head or what they made up in their bedroom, or what occurred to them after drinking Glenlivet. They are announcing what the commissioners agreed upon.
So are you then
So-
saying,
so let me-
I have to ask you there, though, Prof, are you then saying that whatever Mr. Chebukati announced on that day was not as a result of corporate consensus?
It was not, and I take great exception to my distinguished colleague, my brother here, Mr. Latif, for saying that the 4 commissioners were dissenters. They're not dissenters. You see, in a commission, the majority cannot be the dissenters. It is the minority that can dissent, because the majority is the one that makes the decision. And if a majority makes a decision, those who don't agree with the majority are the dissenters. So in this particular question, and this is a very important point as a narrative, to understand that it is the decision of the 4 that is the decision of the commission, not the decision of 2 rogue commissioners and Mr. Chebukati.
Can we go back? Because this, from 2017, with the decision of the Supreme Court, it then meant that declarations, or rather elections, then were conducted and results then sent from the constituency. What we were seeing at Bomas was then just a verification of what happened there.
Yeah, but that verification is not an idle exercise. It is not an idle exercise.
However, during the process of elections, I mean, we've seen it jump out of the woodwork over the last 3 days that Azimio did not have enough eyeballs on the process. That everywhere across board, polling centers countrywide, that there were just not enough people checking and seeing what was going on, because you had the liberty to do that. Was that the case? And if it was, why then was not enough attention paid at the polling centers?
Well, first of all, I don't know where you are getting your information from, that we didn't have enough eyeballs. We had eyeballs and much more at the polling station. We had bodies with eyeballs and fingers and noses and eyes at those polling stations.
And they were breathing.
And they were alive and well.
Okay.
Now, let me say this, but that is beside the point, in fact. That does not, speak to the point in contention, which is the power of the chairman of the IEBC to unilaterally announce a result that is not a result of a consensus or a majority vote by the commission.
But he
That is a
said he
key
announced
question.
what he
That
received.
question then, please answer it with reference to the law, any bit of the law,
Yes,
or case law,
yes.
where the word consensus comes in, and consultation, and then announcement.
Yes.
Where exactly, what law says that you, the returning officer of the presidential election, will have to sit in plenary with your commissioners and come to an agreement that this is the decision of Kenyans, and therefore we agree that we go and announce it.
Yeah. So, I mean, the IBC law is clear in Clause 7 of it that decisions on any matter, which we quoted at the press conference, on any matter before the IEBC must be either by consensus or by a majority of the commissioners present and voting.
Okay.
That is in black and white.
Okay.
Okay?
So, if I could just ask a question, just interject there.
Sure.
Is it only a presidential decision, a presidential election that constitutes the decision of the IEBC? That's why I go back into the other 5 elections.
No. I
Are
think
the other 5 elections tantamount to decisions of the IEBC when the returning officer of the county declares Sakaja as the governor-elect of Nairobi?
Absolutely. Otherwise, their verification would be a dead letter.
So at what point does the commission in plenary sit to agree that the returning officer in Nairobi County can declare Edwin Sifuna as the senator-elect of Nairobi?
The commission does not sit and declare that. Okay, the returning officer at the constituency level or at the county level, for the sake of in the case of a senator, announces the winner of the election at that particular county. Okay, that decision of the returning officer is then verified at Bomas, and
So it's not final.
It is not really final. Not really final. It's a determination by the returning officer in that county or constituency that this is the winner of the election.
Okay.
But that decision is subject to verification.
Shall
Otherwise,
Shall there be a further announcement that we should expect that tells us whether Edwin Sifuna is the senator-elect of Nairobi?
So for example, you've seen, like I said before, you've seen the chair of the commission or other commissioners actually announce who the MPs elector, or the senators elector, in particular, either counties or constituencies. They're announcing that because they are putting their stamp of approval on the decision of the returning officer.
Okay.
That's what they are doing. Otherwise, verification will mean nothing.
Okay.
And why would the commissioner exist? Simply
But
to
Prof,
be,
are we saying
to be,
that the elections, the 1,880 elections declared by the various returning officers across the country,
yes,
are subject to verification by the commission and subject to reconfirmation by the commission?
absolutely.
So they are not final. We don't have an MCA elect, an MP elect, a governor elect, woman rep elect, senator elect until the commission sits in plenary to agree that, yes, we agree with all the decisions.
Yeah, otherwise, the commissioner would not exist, would not need it. We'll simply have, you see, for example, in other countries, let me explain this. In other countries, in the United States, for example, there's no national electoral body. You know that very well.
Yeah.
Elections are a state matter, okay? In that particular case, what is decided at the state level, at the county level, at the state level, at the county level is final. There is no overarching body that decides in the United States that so-and-so has been elected senator from that particular state.
Yeah.
Okay? It is a state secretary of state who verifies those elections and then says, finally, you, Eric Latif, you are the winner.
Right.
There's no agents in Washington. That's final. In our case, there's a final, sort of
Authority.
Authority that decides that this is the final winner of this election. And then it is certified that way, so that, and one of the things I've said before is this complicating factor of a national election body is perhaps something we ought to look at, to ask ourselves, should we continue to have a national election body or should we break it up into 47 different bodies that can do exactly what you want to do, which is make the result at the county level final. Yeah, we can do that. But as long as you have the national body, it has that role to play.
City wants to ask a question before he comes in. So what I'm hearing you say is, at the point of gazettement, that is the final.
That's the final.
That will have been determined by the commission in plenary, blah, blah, blah.
And it cannot be gazetted unless the commission says so.
So similarly, the returning officer of the county and the constituency and the presidential election can go ahead and announce the result, subject to further verification at a later stage by the commission.
Correct.
So Chebukati's decision,
but a commission
is still subject to further deliberation.
Announcement, not decision.
Chebukati's announcement is still subject to further deliberation by the commission at a later stage after he has announced.
Thank you, my sister. I think that my brother here wants Chebukati to make a decision as opposed to
announcement.
Yeah. No, that's correct.
Okay.
That's
City.
correct.
Let me attempt to understand the law. 2017, matters went to the Supreme Court, and there was a little matter about results that determined a presidential election and the role of the votes at the polling centers.
Correct.
And it being fundamental to that decision. Meaning, if I understand it correctly now, this is me now trying to interpret it. Whatever the outcome that is arrived at the polling center with regards to a presidential election, that is what is the determinant. These are the processes that we've been busy discussing. Where then do their role come in? Okay, you've verified, you've done whatever you've done, you verified again. What if that tallying doesn't add up and it is not in agreement with what happens at the polling stations?
So let me say this, and it's a good question, CT. Let us say, for example, in polling station X, there are 700 registered voters. But then when the Form 34A is filled, it has 800 votes. And that is announced, for the sake of argument, at the polling station. And then and then it becomes part of the tally. And then let us say you come to Bomas to verify that. And the agents notice that the voter turnout in that particular polling station was higher than the number of registered voters in that polling station. This matter is obviously escalated. You don't just note it on a piece of paper and forget about it as though it's a non sequitur. Okay, the commission, when it sits down to look at that number and sees that anomaly, what would you like the commission to do? Would you like the commission as a corporate body to fold its hands and say that our hands are tied by this wrong figure in the Form 34A? It cannot, because if it comes out to announce a wrong result, knowing that it's a wrong result, there's a problem. Okay? And by the way, I should say also that with regard to this particular case that you are referring to, even the announced result of the IEBC is not final. Even that is not final, what is pronounced by Mr. Chebukati. It is subject to review by the Supreme Court.
If it's taken to the Supreme
Even the
Court.
Supreme Court, which then finally determines what happens. For the down ballot races, there are petitions filed before the High Court for the courts to determine. So I know you are focusing on the word final, but I'm trying to give you this sense that the word final is also tentative.
You know, Professor,
until the courts
final
pronounce
is not
them,
final.
You know, Professor,
until the courts pronounce themselves.
there's something that happened. You've quoted the US, and I want to also quote the US. It was in 1972.
Yes.
There was a win by Richard Nixon, the Republican candidate, and he beat McGovern, who was a Democratic candidate. One of the biggest margins that has ever been seen in US history.
Yeah, it was a whitewash.
60% and over.
Yes, yes.
I refer now to the biography of Nixon. People were celebrating, but Nixon was the one who was not celebrating because what was in the background was, and which was about to break out, was the Watergate scandal, which involved the break-in in the headquarters of the Democratic Party in Washington.
Yes.
Okay? Now, I look at our elections. Every electoral cycle, there is some mentioned misdeed or the other, or some scandal or the other.
Correct.
Now, everything that I'm hearing and I'm seeing and reading seems to speak to this very same thing. We've had an election, an outcome has been announced, but it's more like a possible outcome as opposed to a definitive outcome.
Correct.
Now, when we look at a situation such as ours, do we have the mechanisms to be able to conclusively determine whether everything that is in the air, these allegations, this didn't happen, this happened, to conclusively determine that this is actually what happened?
So the short answer is yes. If you look at the whole chain of decision-making process and confirmation, okay, final confirmation, and here you must include the courts. You cannot leave them out. It is not simply a question of the electoral bodies themselves or the electoral body itself, going through its motions to conduct the election, to count and tally and to announce. Okay, that is subject to a court challenge because that's our system. Okay, our judiciary is the one that has the final say on that particular question. So yes, we have the systems. I think the problem that we have, quite frankly, CT, is that when we as a country decided to create these independent institutions, we did not know, or we thought rather that just creating an independent body would suffice because we were trying to cure a problem. And the problem that we are trying to cure is the capture of these institutions by the executive. Okay? That is still a problem because members of the commission can still be captured by the government and they can still do government bidding. But I think the problem that we did not cure, and which is a huge, huge black box in my view, is the capture of institutions which are independent by cartels, by non-state actors. Yeah. That is a real problem. I think I don't want to impugn anyone's credibility, but I just want to say that, for example, I was interviewed, as you all know, for the office of the Chief Justice of Kenya in 2016.
Yep.
okay? The Judicial Service Commission, gave us, graded us.
They give you a score.
Yeah, they graded us, okay? And in that, I'm supposed to have gotten a particular score, which I've read in the papers. That has never been communicated to me as an individual. That's number one. We filed a challenge with the Katiba Institute before the courts to actually get that result. It is now 6 years later. I have not seen that result.
You have no idea how you fared in the interview.
Yeah, so I don't think I lost.
You reject.
I don't think I
You
lost.
say you're Chief Justice in waiting. I mean,
The people's chief justice.
I don't think I lost that. I lost that because if I must be told I lost and this is what you scored, right? And that was never done. So what is the Judicial Service Commission hiding? Okay. So that's, you see, so there are problems with these institutions that we call, because you conduct.
To call them independent.
Yeah, and you conduct a process in the open. They say we were interviewed on TV. People say, some people have told me that I did very well on TV, that I won it running away, going away, but then the score showed something different. So why conduct an open interview where it's a public spectacle and you don't give the result and you don't even show what the various commissioners gave me? I would like to see what my friend, Mr. Gideon Wigai, then Attorney General, was a member of the commission, gave me, what the others gave me. I'd like to see all of that. So this is just to say to CT that even our court system does not deliver that justice. There's a lot of questions left to be answered.
In 20 seconds, Prof, speak to the country as a spokesperson for the Raila's presidential secretariat. 20 seconds. What do you want to say? What do you want to tell the supporters and the entire country?
I just want to tell our supporters that we want to thank them for coming out in large numbers to vote for us. We appreciate their support. We know that we won the election. We expect to take certain steps going forward, which will confirm that victory in short order. As far as we are concerned, there is no validly or legally declared winner of the election. There is no president-elect. Perish that thought, because processes are being undertaken. So we don't recognize that. I've seen a particular fellow saying that he's president-elect. We don't recognize that at all. And we ask our supporters to stand by and stay calm and stay firm.
Professor MAKAU MUTUA, spokesperson for the Raila Odinga Campaign Secretariat, thank you very much for being with us.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.